If you're building with Payload CMS right now, there is one question that probably matters more than anything else. Should you start a new project with version 3 today, or should you wait for version 4? Because V4 does not look like just another small release. From what the Payload team has shown so far, it could change how Payload feels in real client projects. Not by rewriting the whole foundation again, but by improving the parts that matter when real teams actually use it. The admin UI, content organization, media management, AI assistant development, and possibly even framework flexibility beyond Next.js. So in this video, I want to walk through what we can expect from Payload CMS version 4.0. What actually matters, what is still uncertain, and most importantly, whether you should wait for it or keep building with V3 for now. And just to be clear, as of recording this video, V4 is not released yet. So this is not a migration guide. This is my early take on where Payload is going. And that is and what could mean for real projects. Before we go feature by feature, I think it's important to frame this properly. V4 does not look like the same kind of release as Payload version 3 was. V3 was the foundation shift. It connected Payload much more deeply to Next.js. It changed how projects were structured, and for many people, it felt like pretty big migration. V4 feels different. From what we've seen so far, it looks less like rebuilds and more like Payload becoming a more complete product. Better for developers, but also better for editors, marketers, content teams, and ultimately clients. And that is why the first thing I want to talk about is probably the most visible one, the admin UI. So let's start with the part that most people will notice first. Before we talk about APIs, config files, or database layer, we have to talk about the admin UI. Because for developers, Payload has already been strong for a long time. It is TypeScript first, it is code first, you control the data model, you own the data, you can self-host it, and you can customize almost everything. Because for developers, Payload already has been strong for a long time. It is TypeScript first, it is code first. You control the data model, you own the data, you can self-host it, and you can customize almost everything. So developers already have plenty of reasons to like Payload. And it is easy to understand why it has been growing in popularity. But there is one area where Payload has sometimes lagged behind the alternatives. And in my view, that area is the experience for non-developers. Because clients do not care about your collection config files. Marketing teams do not care about your elegant hooks management. Editors judge Payload almost entirely through admin panel. This is the product they actually touch every day. Think about what actually editors do. They look for content, they edit pages, they upload media, they schedule blog posts, may perhaps update homepage, they manage marketing campaigns and make small changes with hoping of not needing developer. And this is where Payload has sometimes felt a bit rough, technically very strong, but visually and practically maybe still too developer focused. And I have run into this problem myself. I tried to make the admin feel more polished using Tailwind and Shutdown UI components, but honestly the whole thing was very difficult to work with. So you're often stuck between two options. Use Payload admin mostly as is, or build completely custom backend admin from scratch. And in some projects, I've done this. On top of the Payload local API, I've built my custom backend. Not because Payload could not handle the data, it absolutely could, but because I wanted clearer, more polished interface for clients. Something with custom dashboards, custom flows, just more pleasant UI that's connected to the brand. And if Payload v4 improves the admin UI, that is a massive win. Not just because it's going to look nicer, but because it makes Payload easier to sell, easier to hand over, and easier for real teams to actually use it. From what was shown, the admin improvement seems to touch areas like list and edit views, fields, drawers, models, but also upload views, and very important, rich text editing. And this matters because if you show the current admin to client, it feels rough. They might lose confidence. Even if the technical foundation is excellent, a better admin makes Payload feels more serious, more mature, more ready for marketing teams, designers, editors, and ultimately clients. So for me, this is probably the thing I'm most looking forward to. But a better looking admin is only one part of the story. The next question becomes, can people actually find and manage content once the project grows? Because every CMS feels simple when you only have few collections. The real test comes later. When project becomes bigger, messier, and more real, that brings us onto the content organization. At the beginning, you might have a couple of pages, couple of posts, simple media, maybe a couple of product pages. Perhaps you've added case studies. At the beginning, flat collections are fine. Everything is easy to understand, as everything is easy to find. You as a developer, you know exactly how the project works because you're the one building it. However, if you not build the project yourself, and the project has grown, you've added pages, added more relationships, more languages, more campaigns, perhaps more people start working inside the system. This is where the problems starts. As developers, they might still understand the structure. They might know collections, they might know relationships and the data model. But now imagine an editor coming into the admin panel. They do not think in data models. They don't think in code, they think in structure. They might ask questions like, where does this page live? Which campaign is this asset part of? How can I find all posts by a certain category? How can I compare different language versions? What about search? Search is not always enough. Sometimes you need folders. Sometimes you need tags. Sometimes you need a page tree. Sometimes you just want to browse content without searching for it. And this is why the new update is focusing on adding hierarchies, folders, tags, and better browsing. This might not be the flashiest feature, but for real content teams, it could be one of the most useful ones. Developers think in collections and relationships, editors think in structure, and Payload version 4 seems to be trying to support both of those. And once content starts growing, media usually grows even faster. Think about all the images, PDFs, product files, brand assets, videos, localized documents that your business have. At some point, media is no longer just an upload, it becomes part of a company content infrastructure. And this is another area where Payload 4 is seemingly moving into more serious direction. For any company that deals with a lot of assets, this is very important. DAM, the digital asset management, can become the most important part of the whole business, right? It can become the whole system. In small project, uploads are simple. You upload an image, you use it on a page, done. But in real business project, media becomes a system. Brand files, product sheets, legal documents, case studies, marketing materials, And the list goes on, and probably 5 versions of the same asset, right? Because someone might have uploaded again before checking if existing one already exists. People expect more than just basic upload field. They expect previews, versioning, access control, organization, a source of truth. But most importantly, I think they expect to know where a file is used. And this last one, I think it's very important. Nobody wants to delete one image and later realize it broke 10 landing pages. Nobody wants to replace a PDF without knowing where the old one was linked to. And nobody wants assets floating around with no ownership, no structure, no context. So if Payload v4 improves media previews, versioning, localized fields, usage reference, and asset organization in general, I think this is a very big step. It makes Payload feel less like a developer CMS and more serious content platform for real businesses. And again, this fits the larger theme. V4 seems to be about maturity, not just powerful in code, but useful in day-to-day content work. Now, the next one is a bit different. It's not only about editors, it's also about developers. Because the way we build Payload project is changing. More and more developers are using tools like Cursor, Cloud Code, Codex, and other AI coding agents. And Payload is a very interesting CMS for this. Because so much of the project is defined in code. But also, this creates a problem. AI needs to understand Payload properly. Otherwise, they can make a very confident mistakes. So this is where AI workflows become important. Payload, as I already mentioned, is a very good fit for AI assistant development. Payload projects are structured, collections are in code, fields are in code, access controls, hooks, globals, everything is defined in one code base. So AI tools have something real to reason about. This is a big advantage. But if you have used Payload with Cloud Code, Cursor, Codex, or other tools, you probably know the frustration. It keeps inventing APIs. It is misunderstanding relationships. It's creating recursive loops. It completely ignores Payload convention. It writes code that looks right, but it doesn't work. And the annoying part is that it's often very confident while doing those mistakes. So a better MCP support, payload skills could help a lot. MCP gives AI tools a more structured access to the payload project, while skills give AI better instructions for how to work with payload. This does not magically mean this doesn't mean that the project will be built perfectly, but it should reduce lazy mistakes. Ideally, you get a fewer hallucinated APIs, better collection generation, better use of hooks, more robust access control, better seeding data, and a better understanding of the project structure. I think this is important because other open source frameworks are already moving in this direction. For example, Medusa.js has pushed a lot into AI assistant development. They're trying to make it easier for agents to understand how their framework works. Payload doing something similar makes a lot of sense. Because if AI coding agents are going to be a part of how we build projects, then frameworks need to become easier for those agents to understand. Not just easier for humans, also easier for tools. The last area is framework flexibility. And this one matters more strategically. Because V3 tied Payload very strongly to Next.js. For many projects, that was a good thing. Next.js gave Payload a very powerful full-stack foundation, but it also created a question. Will Payload always be this tightly connected to one framework? The latest version seems to suggest the answer might be no. For those who remember the version 2 days, you might hear this and think, oh no, another big breaking change, and I understand the reaction. Version 3 was a major shift. It moved Payload much closer to Next.js. It basically made it impossible to run without it. And it made it the main path. So for the full Payload experience, the admin UI, the API routes, preview routes, everything working together was tied to Next.js. And honestly, for many projects, that has been a good thing. Next.js gave Payload a strong foundation. It made it easier to build full stack application and it gave developers a very powerful setup. But it also meant Payload became very tied to just one framework. If you wanted a smooth experience, this was pretty much the only choice. There have been some workarounds. For example, people have experimented with Astro.js, a 10-stack start using just the local API, but realistically, Next.js was the only option. Now, in the latest update, the team has showed Payload running with 10-stack forms, not the start itself. That's interesting. I don't think that does mean that they are moving away from Next.js. And I definitely would not plan a production project around 10-stack start or Astro.js just yet. It is still too early to tell. For production projects today, Next.js still is the safe path. But realistically and strategically looking, this is a positive sign. If Payload becomes less tightly tied to one framework, that opens more options long term. Maybe 10-stack start, Astro.js, and any other Vite-based apps, for example, or perhaps even other languages. The point is not that everyone should switch away from Next.js immediately. The point is that Payload may become less locked into one framework, and that gives ecosystem more room to grow. Again, it signals the maturity, it makes Payload more flexible, and long term, it could make Payload easier to adopt in more type of projects. So when you look at all of this together, I do not think version 4 should be seen as just another feature update. The bigger story is that Payload seems to be maturing. Version 3 changed the foundation, while version 4 seems focused on improving the experience on top of that foundation. And that is exactly what Payload needs if it wants to move deeper into real business project. My early take is simple. Version 3 changed the foundation. It made Payload work really well with the modern Next.js full stack model. Version 4 seems to improve the product experience on top of that foundation. Better admin UI, better content organization, better media workflow, better AI tooling, and potentially more framework flexibility. And I think that is the right direction. Because Payload is no longer just a cool CMS for developers. People are using it for real business systems, B2B website, e-commerce backends, SaaS admin tools, internal tools, content platforms, multi-tenant, multilingual system. And for those projects, developer experiences is not enough. The admin interface matters. Content structure matters. Media workflows matter. The migration paths matter. AI tooling matters. So what can we expect from Payload CMS 4.0? Not just more features, more likely a more mature product. For production today, I would still stay on version 3 for some time. But if you build with Payload, watch Payload 4.0 closely. Especially around admin UI, hierarchies, media, MCP, AI skills, framework adapters, and migration nodes. This is where I think real impact will be. And I'm curious what you think. Do you think these changes will push Payload further into mainstream? Or do you think Payload risks losing some of its developer-first appeal? If you want to follow the latest status updates on Payload 4 development, check out my blog and subscribe to newsletter. Thank you.